Communication is the Achilles heel for so many businesses. On paper, it's a really simple thing to get right, and yet so many businesses fail to nail. Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure, Royston. I mean, the feedback...
Where would you put the importance of really defining purpose, values, behaviours and culture? Where does it sit in the prioritisation for business leaders, would you say?
Purpose is our DNA.
Leaders who are listening to this conversation, to set them up for success and really go away as purposeful, inspirational leaders, what will be your parting words for them?
Oh gosh, you put me on the spot there, Royston. I use your words, Royston, from one of your previous books recently. When delivering something, I said success is not an accident, and I am an absolute true believer in that.
Welcome to episode 7 of The Life of a Business Leader. I'm delighted to be joined today by Jon Dutton, who is the CEO of British Cycling. So before we go any further, Jon, thank you so much for coming along today and giving up your time. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Royston. My pleasure. It's great to connect with you again, and looking forward to our conversation.
I know we've had lots of conversations over the past, but I was intrigued by today's title for the podcast series that I also know just so happens to be one of your phrases and something you talk about a lot. Without challenge, there is no achievement. So what I thought would be really useful is if at the start of our conversation today, just give me your take on that and where does that phrase come from?
I think reflecting on my career, first of all, it's been a privilege to spend 29 years working in sport, mainly professional sport, and just a feeling of fulfillment when you do something and you have succeeded, having overcome adversity. And I reflect on my professional career, and I think that's been a constant, doing things tough, but delivering success by working with amazing people. So, I like challenge. I will always walk towards challenge, and the achievement just feels even greater if you can overcome that challenge and have a sense of being fulfilled and a sense of the sort of uplifting nature of overcoming adversity.
So, Jon, talking about challenge, I know prior to British Cycling, you were the CEO of the Rugby League World Cup. And I know there's a lot of challenges because that was coming out of pandemic and it actually got delayed a year. And I always remember us having a conversation about leading in uncertainty and where you're against a backdrop of so much change. So does that link into the title as well? And that whole conversation that we had about leading in uncertainty, because uncertainty hasn't gone away. I'm really interested in your take and your position on how do you deal with ambiguity and uncertainty today as a leader?
It's very difficult, isn't it, Royston? And I remember some of the conversations pre the pandemic, and of course then the pandemic came, disrupted, changed all of our lives, and at that moment in time we were trying to deliver an event that had a start, a middle and an end. It had to start on a particular date with a group of really talented but quite young people, many starting their first step on the career ladder of working in professional sport. So to be a leader and try and deliver certainty at a time when none of us knew what was going to happen almost on a day-to-day basis in our life. So I take a great amount of learning from that and perhaps know I'm a little less tough on myself because at that moment in time it felt very, very acute. It felt like you wanted to give people the answers. It felt like you wanted to be authentic, but that constant internal struggle of just not quite knowing what the outcome was going to be. And of course, from our experience, and I guess for the listeners, the context of the Rugby League World Cup was a 7-year project. We got to within a couple of months, having worked for 6 years to deliver a major global sporting tournament, and we had to postpone it and move it back by 12 months, which was personally quite devastating, professionally devastating, but also back to without challenge there is no achievement. We managed to regroup, stop feeling sorry for ourselves, and delivered something that was really special. And that was a moment for me, deep learning, also being appreciative. We made a number of mistakes, but also the, I guess, maturity to learn from that and certainly inject it into everything I'm doing at the moment, and thoroughly enjoying being a chief executive of a national governing body, doing big, bold things. But a lot that period of time in and around 2020, 2021 the pandemic, that uncertainty and ambiguity, the VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity that surrounds us. I think we've all taken so much from that experience that affected every human being on the earth at that particular time.
And what doesn't break you makes you stronger. So you talked about some deep learnings that you've got. Could you be, if you were sharing some of those deep learnings that you think could be really relevant for our listeners in, leadership, in running an organization, particularly through that turbulent period, what were some of those specific deep learnings that you could perhaps share?
I think, first of all, finding a sense of calmness. We were delivering a major global sporting tournament, also a very significant social impact program that we knew was going to affect a large number of people, particularly in a community. We largely delivered that in the north of England. So at a time when there was complexity, there was ambiguity, there was uncertainty, just being calm, I think linked to that is putting things in context. So I talk about the three P's: pragmatism, prioritization, but having that sort of sense of perceptive ability to manage the situation and remain calm. I think also, Royston, being a good communicator, and I know that's probably an easy thing to say and it's always at the top of everyone's list, but I would associate that also with active listening, the ability to, not just have a conversation and take a couple of things away, but really get to the heart of what people were saying and how people were feeling. Someone said to me recently, leadership is about how you make people feel. And I thought a lot about that, Royce. I'm sure you'll have your own take on it, but I thought that was also really perceptive because, we are managing human beings. We are all vulnerable. We all behave in different ways, and how you get, more out of people depends, I think, on that how you make people feel. And I think all of those things. We'll talk about managing crisis. Crisis for me, crisis is a word that should only be used in the harshest possible circumstances. So back to that, putting things in perspective, and the perspective was we weren't on the front line, we weren't saving lives, we're trying to deliver something really special. So let's just put that in perspective before we start to behave in a difficult way.
I love those two C's: the calmness and then context. And I know you talk about communication as if it's a real basic thing, but I'm sure you'd agree from all your experiences that communication is the Achilles heel for so many businesses. And yet on paper, it's a really simple thing to get right. And yet so many businesses fail to nail the proactive quality communication. Why do you think that is? Where's the Achilles heel?
I'm not sure, Royston. I mean, the feedback, certainly in the organisation I'm in and the last organisation, I think two key component parts. One is authenticity. I think to be a leader, you need to be authentic. People will see through it if you're not authentic. Yeah. And I think the second one is about being a role model. I've always, since very early in my career, always said I would never ask someone to do something that I wouldn't be prepared to do myself. And I think you've got to really dial that up in role model. And of course, we're working now in this hybrid world. And communication becomes even more important. If you're not in the office 5 days a week, seeing people on a daily basis, having those water cooler moments, then communication becomes even more critical. So I think all of the above, and I think we can probably think of examples in our past where we haven't communicated as well as we could have done, and maybe learn from that. And I'm blessed with having an opportunity to maybe put some of those lessons into practice in this fantastic organisation that I work in. But good communication. One of the pieces of feedback we got, Royston, from many of our younger teammates at the time of the Rugby League World Cup and going through that adversity is that we over communicated, and I've thought a lot about that because we were authentic. We told people as it was, and some people really struggled to deal with that. And that wasn't just about the information people were receiving. It was also about what was going on in their life. So many young people who maybe moved to Manchester, where we delivered our tournaments, our headquarters, had become quite isolated. We were all locked down in the pandemic. And, sport and sports events it's a very social role. It's where you perhaps go to make new friends, to meet your colleagues, have a social experience as well as doing a role. So that all added to it, and I believe you should over communicate, but I think also then thinking of the vulnerability of people is another added complexion. And I've seen changes to the workforce over my career, and I think it will continue to evolve. Maybe people have different expectations. There's a whole legislative piece that we can never lose sight of. But fundamentally, just never, ever forget we're just dealing with human beings, and always treat people you'd expected to be treated. Really simple things that we were taught as children. And I think in the leadership role, that's never more important than right here, right now.
Yeah, I love it. There's some real golden nuggets you're sharing here, really practical insights. Jon, one of the things I'm really intrigued about, and having had lots of conversations with you when you were at Rugby League World Cup, where I see one key nuance and difference between Rugby League World Cup and British cycling is Rugby League World Cup had a start, a middle, and a clearly defined end because it was a tournament that you were putting on. And of course, British cycling it's got a start, a middle, and it's infinite in terms of the organisation. What are the fundamental differences between running a Rugby League World Cup where there's that clearly defined end goal? How do you motivate people? How do you create an environment where you unlock the potential in people when you have got a end date when the tournament finishes, where all the people go away and move on to their next challenge? Are there fundamental differences in the two?
I think the fundamental differences, I also think there are fundamental similarities as well, Royston. So if we go back to my previous role, I was there on day zero. I was the first person. A lot of my ideas, going seeking funding, setting the company up. I appointed the board that then subsequently went to advert, and I was a successful candidate. I mean, it was quite a strange process, but it almost became an obsession because I was there right at the start. It felt there was a lot of me in that project, and you're absolutely right. We were always going to come to an end point, even though we pushed it back by 12 months and people then had to go on to different careers. I never saw myself in the role I'm currently doing, and what really motivated me was I saw an organisation that I loved the sport. I saw challenge, and I remember very fondly at my first interview of quite an extended recruitment process. Simple question: why do you want the job? And I talked about serendipity, and it just felt of all the roles out there that I could have applied for, this was the one. I immediately felt the connection, and the connection was definitely built on challenge. It's fair to say the organisation, financial reputation, a whole host of challenges, and just to say that we're still working through with a magnificent team some of those. But the difference then is I came to an organisation I didn't know anyone, so back to the old bit, pretty much was involved in appointment and recruitment of all the key people in the early days. So an organisation, we employ about 250 people when I started, quite a big senior leadership team full of talent and experience. So to walk in on day one, not knowing anyone, appreciating there were some big challenges to address, that felt quite alien in comparison to what I'd done. But it didn't take me long to appreciate the similarities, and the similarities were a sense of purpose. So one of the things that we did in the early days in my tenure is focus on a new purpose, and our purpose is to bring the joy of cycling to everyone. So something that is ubiquitous, that is engaging, that is emotive, it's also commercially compelling. And that was the first bit of the jigsaw of really bringing people together. I think the second thing, probably similar but different to the Rugby League World Cup, was action speaking louder than words. So when I came to the organisation, perhaps some cynicism from some people, but just laying out, we're going to do some things, and we're getting on and we're now doing those things, and that now starts to feel really powerful. So I think we talked previously about the Jim Collins story in the flywheel. You put your shoulder to the wheel, it doesn't turn, you get more people. As soon as you get that sense of momentum, and that feels really palpable in the organisation I'm in at the moment. And that, again, feels really uplifting through the challenge that we've collectively focused on. So start, middle and end compared to the rhythm and the sort of drumbeat of regularity. But it's fair to say in cycling, we're just about to send our team to the Olympics and the Paralympics. That's a big moment for us. A few weeks ago, we delivered our first race, the Tour of Britain Women. We've got a Tour of Britain Men coming up in September. So all of these things that we're looking forward to almost brings that start, middle and an end, because we start the Olympics will finish. So it's almost within, whilst it's got that regularity, it is within little windows that have that immediacy. And it's about preparation, isn't it? We've got an absolutely amazing performance director. He knows that he has to get the riders, the athletes, ready for that race. And it might take 30 seconds, 10 seconds to win an Olympic gold medal. The race is going to start and the race is going to end. And we, as a team, need to prepare the riders as best we can. So I think, similarities and differences. What I can say at the moment, Royston, thoroughly enjoying the challenge. Love working with people. Love seeing people progress, and I love to see that sense of momentum. And you can't. It's quite hard to measure it and touch it and taste it, but you just feel it. You can just feel it, and that to me feels uplifting. So, I'm just the bus driver. I'm just playing my part in trying to bring people together, and it's the people that are going to make the difference. But definitely, actions speak louder than words. We can talk and talk and talk. When you get on and do something about it and you can see the difference that's being made, that for me is, that without challenge, there is no achievement, and it feels uplifting.
And your passion just oozes out in your conversations. It's brilliant. And, our challenge today is going to be keeping this conversation to short and sharp and to the point, because I know when you and I get talking, we could just go on for hours, because once we get into flow and into conversation. There is one thing that you just talked about there, Jon, I want to drill into in a bit further. You talked about giving people a sense of purpose. And the one common denominator, I saw what you did at Rugby League World Cup, and the amount of effort and time, even though there was a definitive end, that you put into vision, into values, into behaviours, into defining the culture. And it sounds like you're doing a similar recipe, you're applying a similar principle to British cycling. If our listeners were really thinking about the importance of that whole cultural piece and vision and values, to anybody at an early stage in their journey, where would you put the importance of really defining purpose, values, behaviours and culture? Where does it sit in the prioritisation for business leaders, would you say?
Number one, absolutely at the top. I mean, purpose is our DNA. It's the reason why we get out of bed every morning. And if we can create a culture and environment where people are happy, healthy, enjoy coming to work, people are going to be more productive, and the organisation is going to be healthier for it. So that sense of purpose also is about belonging and the sense of collectivity. The Rugby League World Cup, unbelievably proud of what we did. We had a very strong social purpose, and despite delivering something that 61 games on the field of play, contract with the BBC, all of that, which was great, and then the athlete experience, we could never ever get away from our sense of purpose. It was baked in from the start. It wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't something we had to think about. And I know you spoke to the wonderful Chris Brindley recently, Royston, and Chris was our chair in the latter days, and his sense of values as the chair of the organisation, that was the difference. When we had to make the biggest decision, what do we do? Do we carry on? Do we postpone? Do we walk away? The biggest decision. And Chris started off the board meeting by reminding the board of our values. And I just thought that was just incredible. So whilst there was a fair bit of emotion, a fair bit of anger about the things that have happened, and none of that matters now, you had a chair of the organisation who kept coming back to values. And that really has resonated with me, and I've hopefully brought that through into British cycling to give ourselves a sense of purpose. We're actually writing our new strategy from post-Paris into LA. I'm pretty sure when we come out at the end of that, our purpose will not have changed. Our values will not have changed. So we've got the bread on the outside. The strategy will be the filling on the inside. But having a sense of purpose and building a culture in the organisation, that to me is it's the start.
And two things you just touched on there that I just really want to try and draw out and tease out. So with all the challenges that you had, both at Rugby League World Cup and, of course, going into British cycling, would you say that the clarity around your purpose and your vision and your values, when you are leading in that period of uncertainty, really help with the decision-making process if you use those as your filter by which you drive your decision making. I guess that's the first point I wanted to make.
Yeah. I mean, Rugby League World Cup, 100%. So I'll go back to, we had to make operational decisions, and I largely left that to the really talented team. When you come to the really big strategic decisions, the sense of purpose and the values, I can hand on heart say we were values led all the way through, and we made our decisions on that basis. I think now at British Cycling, a much more complex organisation. So if you look at the sport of cycling, the pastime of cycling, the recreation, cycling, 27 million adults in the UK have ridden a bike in the last 12 months. 27 million people, which is an enormous number. And we want to reach as many of those people as we can. So it's a much bigger ecosystem, but can still be led by the sense of purpose and the values that we have. So I'm such a firm believer in that. And I also think it has a commercial side as well. So I would go back to Rugby League World Cup. A big global organisation came to us and said, we want to partner with you because of what you stand for. And that to me was, wow, that's a seminal moment in my career, and certainly a seminal moment in our journey. And then similarly, British Cycling, we have just recently partnered with Lloyds Bank as our lead partner, and a brilliant organisation. And that largely the discussion has been about what we're going to do together, co-creation, but also the sense of purpose and the social value that we can collectively deliver. So I just think as well as it being uplifting for the organisation, for the people, and give us a real sense of focus and direction, I think there is also a commercial element to that. And of course, we all, as businesses, need money to reinvest back. I'm in the privileged Royston. It's a not-for-profit organisation, but we want to grow and we want to do more things. And for that, we need some cash to be able to do that.
It's really interesting, that delineation you put on it, and link it back to commercial success as well, because there are still pockets, probably particularly in smaller businesses, where they think the whole ESG and environmental, social governance and all that is a nice to have. But what I'm clearly hearing is that there is a hard-edged benefit from commercial success when you do get your culture and you're really clear about your identity and what it is that you stand for as well.
Yeah, and ethical decision making as well. Yeah. We're seeing consumer behaviour has changed beyond all recognition. People now having a strong sense of purpose and making decisions based on what organisations and brands stand for. So, yeah, I think that's really, really pertinent. And if you can get the blend of an organisation that has a strong sense of purpose, has a really fantastic culture that people want to step forward, they want to work for, they want to come to work in a hybrid way, just feel valued, feel happy, then yes, there'll be some bumps in the road, and there'll be some times when you've got to make tough decisions. And as a leader, sometimes that's just why you are the leader and why you are in that position. But that collective responsibility, that sense of belonging, and I think we can learn so much from professional sport. We see it in professional sports clubs, don't we? See strong, people like Jurgen Klopp and what he did at Liverpool in terms of just revolutionising the culture of the organisation. We've seen it. And all of that you can bring into a business. Absolutely. I'm convinced. I've spent 29 years, the blend between on the field of play and off the field of play, and had such a privileged career. But the way we prepare ourselves, the way we effectively train as leaders, the way we need to look after our minds and our bodies, and the way then we reflect, things happen, things go wrong in games, don't they? We can talk about Rugby League as well, by the way, Royston. We can talk about St Helens versus Lee. We can analyse that. But yeah, we can learn so much by professional sports, and we're about to experience the Olympics and Paralympics and see amazing people do amazing things. All of that I think can bring back to the boardroom, to an organisation, and certainly as people wanting to learn, I think that's not a bad starting point.
It's interesting you use the example of Klopp, because I absolutely echo it through grinded teeth being an Evertonian. But Klopp is absolutely, the number of times he'd walk over to the crowd and he'd be pumping his chest, and he absolutely did unify supporters. There was almost a day of mourning when he left Liverpool, wasn't there, because of the impact that he had on the club, not just in terms of the success on the field, but what Liverpool FC stands for now and how relevant it is as an organisation. And you're right, culture was right, the epicenter and heartbeat of that, without a doubt.
In quite a cutthroat world in terms of Premier League football, you look at what happened on his final day, and you look at the emotion that the club showed and the crowd staying and all of that. It's very rare, I thought, and that was because he had charisma, he had personality, he clearly developed culture. He made some mistakes, which he was very open about, and I just think we can learn so much from that. If you have a team that really looks after each other, looks out for each other and looks after each other. And I've always been a firm believer, when you're building a team, particularly an executive team, you don't necessarily all have to like each other. You don't necessarily all have to, the first thing you do at the end of the day is go out for a beer or a glass of wine. But if you have respect, I think everything starts with respect. And then if you build up that sense of looking out for each other, looking after each other, that's so powerful. And you can sort of, again, you can't really measure this, but you can almost just feel it. And when you get to that point, the power that brings when you're with a group of people who all can focus on that sense of purpose, and despite whatever you might think of each other or whatever, none of that matters. None of that matters because you're working in a highly professional environment. And I thrive off situations like that, and also thrive off seeing people do really well. One of my proudest moments is to look back at the Rugby League World Cup and see some of the younger people that came to work for us and see them now absolutely flying in their career. That makes me really, really proud.
And you talked there about the board mix and the senior leadership mix, but that cognitive diversity is really important, isn't it? You don't want to just recruit clones who think the same as you do. It's about debating for the right answers. It's about there being some heated conversations, because that will allow you as a collective leadership team to surely debate and get to the right solutions and outcomes.
Yeah, and having that creative tension, when you've got a sense of respect, within a safe environment, you can have really difficult conversations. I always I use two examples. One, the football analogy. If we picked a football team, if we picked Everton and you picked 11 Jordan Pickfords, you're going to lose. You've picked 11 strikers, you're going to lose. You need people with different skills, different mindsets. But I'll give you my one Rugby League example. In the Rugby League World Cup quarter-final at Warrington, we had Tonga versus Samoa, two Pacific nations who each before the game did their cultural celebration, their cultural performance. People might call it a war dance. And it's a sign of weakness to go first. So we had two Pacific nations, both about to do this, and we were quite nervous. We did the toss of the coin, and it was clear that no one wanted to go first. So what did they do? They did it together. They worked out that they were going to do it together as a sign of respect for each other. They then played the game. They beat the living daylights out of each other, and then they came back together and they prayed together at the end of the game. And I always use that from a leadership perspective, say that is the ultimate sense of respect. So even though they're going to go into this fierce physical contest, they had that level of respect for each other. And I think if the players can do that over 80 minutes on a rugby league field, we can do that in an organisation with a slight more sense of calmness.
Great example, really great example. Jon, I've got three more questions if I can. I'm conscious we're getting to 30 minutes, but while I've got you, I want to get as much out of you as I can, because there's just gold dust in what you're sharing. You talked about the right people and not having 11 Jordan Pickfords or 11 attackers. I don't know about you, but certainly in my conversations this year, when I talk to CEOs, when I talk to business leaders, people challenges is one of the biggest issues. Getting the right people on the bus, getting the wrong people off the bus, and getting the right people in the right seats doing the right things. The whole piece that you talk about really defining your culture, the vision, the values, behaviors, if you've got that right, does it make it easier to recruit the right people and address some of those people challenges that so many businesses seem to be facing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it does. None of this is easy, is it, Royston? We've got to acknowledge that. So if we go back, my previous experience, ground zero, I built everything from that upwards. So created a senior leadership team. the organisation I'm working in, I've inherited a leadership team, and I've seen both sides of that. I'm really enjoying 15 months in, I think, to inheriting a team, and we are all different people, some strong characters, so much experience, and I'm really enjoying, not saying, right, we're gonna have the transfer window and we're gonna clear everyone out and we're gonna rebuild it. We're not in a position, no, I don't want to do that. So we've taken some time to start to get to know each other, to understand each other, and to create a sense. And there are 3 bits that I'm challenged the team to do, and if this is really pertinent as we go forward into our strategy. So one is to feel liberated, not to feel restricted. Now we get money from government and there are certain things we can and we can't do, but just feel a sense of liberation, behave more with a behave more as a private organisation than a public sector organisation. The second bit is a sense of entrepreneurship, and I'm really going to promote this in the organisation because I can see little pockets of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial skills breaking out, but we've never really discussed that. I think that's fantastic, particularly in the complex world that we live in. And then the final one is growth mindset, and I know absolutely you will have loads and loads on this. But if you can get those 3 things, that we're talking about that at the moment as a senior leadership team, and none of it's easy. And you've also not got to be afraid of doing things which A, might be unpopular, or B, you just make mistakes, and just holding your hands up and say, right, okay, we're going to collectively come back together. And I also think that momentum, feeding off the momentum, and as you start to build that, and it becomes really powerful. It's that flywheel all of a sudden. As soon as you start to get it turning, it takes on the it does it itself, doesn't it? That's the whole purpose.
And those 3 things you just shared, Jon, are so interlocking pieces of the same jigsaw, aren't they? People feeling more liberated, because if people are really tight, they will never deliver results because they're so fearful of making mistakes or making decisions. So that whole liberated growth mindset is just phenomenal. And then interestingly, you picked up the entrepreneurship, because I've done a lot of work over the recent years with non-for-profit organizations, and there is something about them having that more of that commercial business mindset. Yep. And I've done a lot around that entrepreneurship, or the intrapreneur, as they call it, in terms of working for another organization. That is so powerful. So I love that. Liberate your people, ignite and foster that culture of intrapreneurship, and then, really foster that growth mindset, because that will really allow the organization to flourish and grow. Love those 3 things.
And also have a sense of challenge. As a leader, I like to be pushed. I like to be challenged, and sometimes that's quite uncomfortable. When you're coming in, you've got some ideas and you want to push ahead, and then someone will challenge you, and you might reflect and think, thanks for that. You've sort of put a step change in, and I have a wonderful relationship with my finance director. We are really different people. And whilst I will never, ever be reckless, I'm always at the spectrum of being really bold and brave and really sort of pushing it. And our finance director is up the other end of the scale of holding me back. And it's brilliant because it keeps me disciplined. It keeps the organisation disciplined. And that's the bit about building a team, isn't it? Building a team with different skill sets. But when we come together, and the conversation I had with the finance director, the sense of wanting the organisation to grow absolutely is palpable between the 2 of us. We're just doing it in a more disciplined way, where we're holding hands with each other. Sometimes makes for tough conversations, but that's great. And that's it. If you can get to a sense of healthy, open discussions, always in the best interest of the organisation, then that's well. First of all, it's a privilege. It's an absolute privilege to be in the position I'm in, and I always remind myself of that, even in some of the tougher times, Royston, of which there have been many.
Jon, can I be provocative for a moment?
Of course.
So you made a comment there about you like to be challenged, and one of the hot topics that keeps coming round and round with businesses that I'm working with from a culture perspective is this whole culture of radical candor with positive intent, and how do you create a 360 culture? But what I find is it's great words, but it's almost a lot of the time it's do as I say, not as I do. So if I went and asked your team members, does Jon truly like to be, positively challenged in the right way, but is he open to being challenged? What would their answer be?
Gosh, we'll do this exercise, Royston. Let's go and have that conversation. I think it will be a positive response. I think we are still on a journey. So 15 months to, we're a big, complex organisation.
Yeah.
But I can reflect on some of the things that we've done. We organised a world tour bike race in 125 days when people said that was impossible. We were only going to get to that by a sense of leadership. Sometimes we haven't got time. We just need to get on and do the stuff, whether it's optimal or not. But also, I couldn't do all that on my own. I needed a great team who were all going to come together with their different skill sets to be able to do that. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from, and sometimes challenge sometimes can feel quite personal. It can feel like you've got a great idea, and you forge ahead with the idea, and you bring that to the team. And that's a really not a great idea, and that can hurt a bit because you sat there and you've been thinking about this and you're quite passionate about it. So I think it's the balance, isn't it? It's the balance between, as a leader, seeking views, and I absolutely love people's views. So I love to talk, to communicate, to have that two-way dialogue. There are also certain times where, just as leader, you've got to be a decision maker. It's what you're paid to do. It's the expectation. And sometimes it's really time limited. Running your organisation, there are things you just have to get on and do it, whether it's populist or not.
Yeah, no, and sport is a great analogy. I talk about it all the time because sport is built on a culture of inspirational and developmental feedback continuously, and there's continuous loops that are going on in any high performance team. And I do think business has got a lot to learn and is still on a journey to really being able to truly practice with authenticity that whole radical candor with positive intent, where there's 360 feedback going on, peer colleague feedback up the line to leadership, managing people effectively. I just think there's such a great opportunity, and it's still a journey.
It's still a journey. You've got to then put the human being at the centre of that. So we've delivered an event this weekend, which was fantastic. A lot of people who will come into work today, really quite tired. And then if you start to have those really difficult conversations, now's not the time to have those difficult conversations or ask for the challenge. And you've just got to remember the human being. You've got to remember people have lots of things going on in their life, some of which we might not be aware of. People receive information in a different way. So it's just, I guess, that empathy and that emotional intelligence that is needed. And I definitely think that is needed more greatly than ever before, Royston.
Agreed.
Put the human being at the centre of it.
Agreed. Two final questions. One, you've talked about the differences, but also the synergies between Rugby League World Cup, where you were before, and now British Cycling. I've got a question for you. Are leadership skills, are they transferable across roles and even across organisations? Because I see so many people going to a new organisation who kind of almost forget what they've done for 20 years. So I'm really interested in your take about how you've transferred and taken all the experiences and skills that you've had into the kind of newco world of British cycling.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that they do. Of course, you need some inherent knowledge and you need experience. But if you look at the past many iterations of the World Economic Forum, what they've said is the number one skill for leadership, and it's complex problem solving. And I think if you are a complex problem solver, with all the things we talked about, emotional intelligence and living in the technology world, and a lot of the conversation we've had, I do think the skills are transferable. Absolutely. I started off my career working in golf. I've worked in football, worked in the Tour de France and UEFA, and 3 Rugby League World Cups, and now in British cycling. It has been such a privilege, and I constantly get asked, certainly in the early days, are you a cyclist? And as it happens, I have always loved cycling, but I have said, maybe to some of the more cynical individuals, thank goodness I have not been hired for my ability to ride a bike. I have been hired for my complex problem solving. That's I care deeply about the sport. I love the sport, But I absolutely am a firm believer, and particularly in the world which is more complex than ever before, I think transferable skills, I think, are highly sought after. And I think as the world continues to evolve, soft power, diplomacy, all of those things are absolutely in demand at the moment.
Great delineation and position of that. Love it. Love it. Final question. It would be remiss of me to be talking to the CEO of British Cycling without talking about marginal gains and 1% incremental, gains that you find. I'm really interested in your take because I absolutely buy the complex problem solving. I also think great leaders today are data-driven leaders. And again, I think the sport is where we can learn so much in terms of how they are data-driven that needs to be transferred into business. I'm just interested in your take around that whole data-driven leadership, measures that matter, performance metrics, and their importance in making informed leadership decisions and also getting agility and pace into the business.
Yeah, and again, probably the theme of the conversation is about balance. So you'll have to come along and have a look at the National Cycling Centre in Manchester, Royston, and see the unbelievable things that the performance team do. Our Great Britain cycling team. When we talk about use of AI, machine learning was embedded in the organisation before AI was a thing that people were talking about, and the technology to build a bike and 3D print frames and all of that amazing stuff. The team are just doing incredible things. So I think we've always been leaders in that space, but you can only be leaders in the constant evolution. We have a wind tunnel for athletes and all of these incredible things. From an organisational perspective, I remember coming in the first couple of weeks and asking for the KPIs, and they read to pages and pages and pages and pages. I said, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to throw all those away. Much, I think, to the horror of many people. Some of them are linked to our public funding and so on. So we're not going to succeed if we have so much complexity. So we need to set ourselves some things that are simple. We're absolutely going to use data, and we've invested more into the insight team in the organisation, and we're still on a journey with that. So I think it's a balance of how you use data, you use actionable insight, because we could drown in data if we're not careful. So it's pulling out the things that are really pertinent and how we're going to use it, and then we get on and we focus on things. We're really interested in that. 27 million people in the ecosystem, about only 1 million of them associate with British cycling, which means we've got a pretty big market opportunity with 26 million people. Well, we need to understand those people. We probably need to have a data acquisition piece that we're going to step forward with. We probably need to have things around engagement that we're going to step forward with. We probably need then the segmentation of the content and all of those things. You can only do that with data and then with insight, but just not being too obsessed by it as well, and putting a human touch on it.
Balance and blend is what's coming through loud and clear. Jon, one final question as we come to an end. Great session, a great content, great interview. Thank you. Without challenge, there is no achievement. If you were to share your final thoughts about leaders who are listening to this conversation to set them up for success and really go away as purposeful, inspirational leaders, what would be your parting words for them?
Oh, gosh, you put me on the spot there, Royston. First of all, purpose is power. I am a firm believer. If you have purpose, it is incredibly powerful. I think from a personal perspective, follow your dreams. Follow your dreams. And I've had such a privilege. I always wanted to be a professional athlete on the field, was never good enough nor brave enough, and have followed my dreams and just had this incredible career. Had to maybe change direction a few times, but follow your dreams and have a level of determination and energy like nothing else. And I am utterly determined to do my best for this organisation and make a difference, and still have the energy to do that. And I think if you can combine those things, you can be successful. I use your words, Royston, from one of your previous books recently. When delivering something, I said, success is not an accident, and I am an absolute true believer in that. Your words.
And your passion comes through loud and clear. Jon, we're going to have to do a part two at some point, but thank you so much for coming on. If you really enjoyed this episode, make sure you like it and share it, and make sure you're following the Life of a Business Leader podcast. There's lots more great interviews that we've got lined up. So from me, a final thank you to Jon for coming along today. Thanks, Jon.
Thank you.